Assalamu alaikum. I am Isra Salahuddin, a dentist and biochemist. I graduated from Faculty of Dentistry, University of Khartoum. I do have MSc of Biochemistry, Faculty of Medicine, University of Khartoum. Today, inshallah, we'll study pentose phosphate pathway. Okay, pentose phosphate pathway. What are the outcomes or the objectives from when we finish this lecture? The student or the candidate should enumerate functions of pentose phosphate pathway. So by the end of this lecture, you should enumerate the functions of pentose phosphate pathway. You should name the enzymes of the pentose phosphate pathway, and you should classify the reactions of pentose phosphate pathway, and also you should compare the functions of the different enzymes in the pentose phosphate pathway. Okay? Pentose phosphate pathway, also called hexose monophosphate shunt, also called phosphogluconate pathway. So we can name it hexose monophosphate shunt, and we can name it also phosphogluconate pathway. So it has actually three names. The three names are international names. Okay? Okay, let's have a small introduction about the pentose phosphate pathway. Okay? Generally, you know that the major metabolic routes for utilizing glucose are glycolysis and pentose phosphate pathway. So, from this sentence, you will know that pentose phosphate pathway is an alternative route for oxidation of glucose. So, other route of oxidation or for oxidation of glucose is pentose phosphate pathway. You know glycolysis, of course. Pentose phosphate pathway is a little bit complex, more complex than glycolysis. Okay, than glycolysis, and it doesn't generate ATP. You know that glycolysis will generate actually ATP, but pentose phosphate pathway won't generate ATP. So, if pentose phosphate pathway won't generate ATP, what the actual functions of pentose phosphate pathway? Pentose phosphate pathway actually has two main functions. Okay, the main functions are two functions. The first function is that it will generate NADPH. NADPH. NADPH will be needed for reductive synthesis. As an example for the reductive synthesis processes, steroid and fatty acid biosynthesis. Okay, so when we generate an ADPH, it will be beneficial for steroid and fatty acid synthesis. Okay, the second function of pentose phosphate pathway is the generation of ribose residues. Okay, ribose residues. And the ribose residues, from its name, of course, you can remember that it's one of the sugar, right? And ribose containing 5 carbon atom. So it's 5 carbon atom sugar. The ribose will be needed for nucleotide and for nucleic acid synthesis. And also it will prevent oxidative damage. Okay, so the ribose in general has two major functions. Okay, it will be needed for nucleotide and nucleic acid synthesis, and it will prevent also oxidative damage. So pentose phosphate pathway will utilize the 6 carbons of glucose. Okay, because we already said that pentose phosphate pathway is one of the oxidative processes or pathways of glucose. So the pentose phosphate pathway will utilize the 6 carbons of the glucose and it will generate 5 carbon sugar, which is ribose and one reducing equivalents in form of an ADPH. The, the reducing equivalent that will be formed from the pentose phosphate pathway is actually an ADPH. It won't be just a single one, okay? So it will generate reducing equivalent in form of an ADPH for reductive biosynthesis, and it will provide also ribose 5-phosphate for synthesis of nucleotides. Pentose phosphate pathway will metabolize dietary pentose sugars, which derive from digestion of nucleic acids. Okay, if we have a quick look at the tissues that can use pentose phosphate pathway actively, which tissues can you use uh, or actually can do this pathway can do this pathway for the glucose actually.